And there we go.
Oh, yes, here we and we are recording. So, welcome everyone to our first proper episode of a slightly shambolic sound recording. Um, with me this evening is Mr. Ben Quirk from Planet Auto,
I am indeed.
and throughout this time that there's a lot going on in the world that's unusual. We thought what we would. Oh, are you still there, sir?
I am.
Yeah, it went a little bit funny there. That's okay. We will take sort of a bit of time to speak about some nice things instead of instead of kind of things which are just a little bit tricky. So we're going to be talking about some automotive topics, and one of the things we're going to be talking about this evening is Volkswagens from the 1980s and early 90s. So, Mr. Quirk, yeah, I gather you actually have one of these cars yourself at the moment.
Yes. A Mark II 16 valve Golf GTI in Helios or Helios, however you like to pronounce it. A 3-door on an H plate, which is 91. And we've owned it, I think it's something like 13 years.
Because you bought it for not a lot of money, didn't you?
£475.
Didn't you buy it from like someone's front garden or something?
Yeah. My friend Dave from London, who also has I think it's a 1987, it's an E-plate, 16 valve, 3-door Golf GTI. He gave me the opportunity to buy some time ago a Mark I 16 valve, which had an engine conversion, and I couldn't find the money at the time, and that car then disappeared. And ever since then, he was like, I will find you a Golf, and he found this one.
Yeah, because you've had done the same kind of thing, haven't you? Because you've put a Mark III 2-litre 16 valve engine in your Mark II 16 valve, haven't you?
Yes. The KR engine came to rest about 3 years ago whilst going along towards Millthorpe on the way, incidentally, to a car show, typically. And all of a sudden the oil buzzer came on, which wasn't really surprising in one of those. But this time the oil buzzer actually meant something. Instead of it just meaning that either the oil sensor had gone bang or it needed an oil filter change, instead the oil pump had failed. But this was completely unaware to us until the engine seized.
Oh, your engine totally seized on the motorway?
On a road going into Millthorpe. Literally, the car just stopped.
It locked up?
Yes.
And you had no drive, nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing. And you just rolled to a halt and that was it?
Yes. I had to knock it out of gear and just roll.
Wow, that could have been really dangerous.
It could have been really dangerous, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people it's happened to on motorways and things, and usually what happens is you're going so fast it just shears through the gearbox anyway and carries on because it breaks everything.
You're pretty lucky that actually it wasn't more of a car that was damaged, aren't you?
Well, that was pretty bad, to be honest, because I didn't quite know where to go with that because, as you know, if an oil pump goes, then it's your big end bearing and all your crankshaft and that seizes. Whereas if you get something like, because this Golf has already had 2 head rebuilds where...
Oh, no!
Exactly. Head gaskets. But, head gaskets are... well, I think every car I've had has likely at some point had a head gasket issue.
Is that the case with your Orions?
Yeah, the Orions went a couple of times. Also, one of those froze and the core plug pushed out. So it didn't actually do the head, but it did push the core plug out from the rear, which I had to put back in with a hammer, which is really hard when you've got bulkhead.
What's really funny is that people go on about the Rover K-Series engine and say, oh my gosh, that's the worst engine ever, and the head gaskets always blow.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're kind of saying to me is that actually Ford, Volkswagen, and plenty of other manufacturers also have head gasket issues.
Yeah.
Or like oil pump failure or something like that.
Yeah.
And I know from my experience in my Astra Twin Top, which is only 12 years old, that has had a head gasket done as well. Not for the reasons why that failed, because the water pump failed. Oh, you still with me?
Yeah. It zoned out then, like it did last time.
Okay, well
carry on.
I was still speaking. Yeah, so I was saying you're it's common actually for a lot of cars to have head gasket problems, isn't it?
Well, you see it. Let's face it. The majority of head gasket problems are usually owners. For example, not noticing a radiator leak or a hose leak. But you do have those occasions when they just fail anyway. But most of them are overheating, as you'll know yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So the engine was completely toast, despite two previous head gaskets done, but at some point. How many miles had it done at that point?
I think it's about 176,000.
Oh, that's insane.
It is, but it was rebuilt in 99,000 from the bottom end up. So it had only done 75,000 miles. But I don't think it was looked after, because originally I found out the guy who used to own it and bought it spent a lot of money on it. He had it regularly serviced. He had tuning bits put on. I mean, for a start, it had a full Magnex exhaust system, which was retailing for about 600 to 700 quid then.
Yeah, but we could probably do another episode at some point about car maintenance. I know I've done a video of this on my YouTube channel, but if you don't service your car regularly and change the oil and things like that, then this is one of the things that can happen, isn't it?
It's a minefield out there, especially with something like a GTI. I mean, they run on high octane fuel. They've got oil coolers. It shows you they're built for performance. Therefore, they need to be maintained. Otherwise, they just go to rack and ruin. I mean, for example, I had the head gasket done at a garage in the Barrow area. And I went to pick it up after a 6-week rebuild. And they hadn't even put an air filter in the box.
Oh, dear. That's
and they'd
bad.
smashed the rear lens.
That's nice.
And I was on the way to the MOT when I noticed this. Now, surprisingly, knowing me, I had a new set of lenses at home. So I had to drive back, get the new lenses, fit them, then take it for the MOT.
Yeah, I mean, you could have told them to throw them on yourself, but best not to do that if you can.
Well, the thing is with this MOT testing station is that's all it is. It isn't a garage. It literally is a drive-in, MOT, drive-out.
Right. Well, that's obviously the sort of place that will remain open at the moment, isn't it, sir? Yeah. But we won't go into that at the moment. But it's just interesting, isn't it? That little things like that, like a cracked rear lens or something, that can be an MOT failure depending on how sort of serious it is.
But you don't need reverse lights. How strange.
You don't need a spare wheel either. You don't need one at all. You don't need a spare wheel. I can't remember about you don't need a rear wiper. You don't need one of those. That's why so many cars have removed. Yeah, you only need one on the right hand side, and you can actually hold a mirror in place with duct tape, as I did with an old Proton years ago.
Well, it's like the Civic when I bought it. If absolutely you remember, the whole casing was gaffer tape, nothing else.
Yeah, you don't actually need a casing. The gaffer tape is fine. You don't even get an advisory. You don't get one.
I had the Sierra, that we were talking about previously, and the Sierra had a hole in the fuel tank. Now, it had passed an MOT because nobody had found the hole in the fuel tank because the fuel hadn't been high enough on that day.
You were so lucky, weren't you?
Yeah, extremely. Someone could have flicked a cigarette and kaboom.
I know, it's pretty funny. So yours is a big bumper model, isn't it? It's a big bumper model, the one you have.
Yeah. Otherwise known as a 90s. It also has the one-piece doors as well, if you remember. So no quarter panel windows, just one full window.
Because those, to my eyes, are my favourite type of Mark II Golf.
Yeah.
Is the big bumper models, not necessarily just for GTIs, but they made others as well.
Yeah.
At the time, but to me, they look the nicest. Some people would say the really early ones, like '84, look the nicest, but I think the really late ones are my favourite. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, the 8 valve I had was that was an '86 D plate.
Yeah.
And that was, that had the small bumpers front and back, but I converted it and put, I'm trying to think what to put on it. I managed to find, I went down to London and saw my friend Dave with his Mark II, and he'd heard from a scrapyard mate of his that there was a Mark II dumped in a garage. And we went, and this Mark II had nothing bar a back bumper. So we took the back bumper off.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So we took the back bumper off, and the only way we could get the back bumper off was basically ragging it off. So it was then held onto the metal on mine by 8 zip ties.
Oh, we love zip ties,
yeah,
sir.
They're strong.
Yeah, I had once had a fuel filter held on with a cable tie.
That's exactly what happened to the Orion. That was held on with zip ties.
Yeah. It's fine though. That's nice and secure. Yeah. That's not coming off unless you cut it off, is it?
Or you catch it on something, which I did.
Oh no, the demise of the Orions. We're gonna have to make a Ford Slightly Shambolic Sound Recording, aren't we, as well?
Well, that's it. We're just kind of going off on obscure tangents about various Volkswagens, Fords, who knows.
This is just what happens, when we have these recordings, because that's why they're slightly shambolic. We're not really that focused. We don't have like a sort of script or anything.
We never have scripts on anything, do we? Video,
we don't have scripts. No
recordings, anything like that. It's all natural. Everything we say, there's no pre-planning. We might read a few specs. That's about it.
Yeah. There's no pre-planning, and we just decided. I mean, we had decided originally to do this just so the viewers know. Yeah. We'd already decided to do this last year in about September,
yes.
And we tried it. It didn't work particularly well. This is working better, which is fantastic. So
you can also check us out on Instagram, because we go live on there and chat as well as YouTube.
I know we got this will be on YouTube. This recording will also go on Anchor FM. So it'll be available on both those platforms for you to keep updated with future episodes. Because we are going to make quite a lot of these, because they're very simple, and I know from previous experience on my channel that a lot of my viewers kind of like this sort of content. I mean, we'll have to see about Planet Auto. I mean, hopefully people will like it. I'm sure they will.
Who knows with our channel? It's so strange, as you know.
I know it is. It is weird, isn't it? Because you've got a whole variety of stuff on there, and you've got your Mercedes and got the Volkswagen. You've got the Alpha as well in there. Hopefully, at some point that'll move to again.
Yes.
The Volkswagen that I want to go on to next. I mean, hopefully we'll be seeing your Mark II Golf on the road at some point over the next few months, because the rebuilding process is quite close to finishing, actually, in a way, isn't it?
It needs 2 drive shafts connecting, some of the ancillaries, a bit of the cooling system testing. It needs the timing doing. I need to reattach the bonnet because I took it off, and I think that's pretty much it. And a battery applying. Is it back?
Still there?
I am. Hello? Hello? There we go. Slowly coming back.
You?
There we go. We're back.
You've bought a new battery for your Golf, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got US.
Yes. So that's all sort of ready, and so that should be on the road.
I had a Bosch S3, but that went on the Merc, as you know. Yeah. The Merc then went in for the work, took the Golf battery with it, and I was left with no battery for the Golf. So a UASA one from GSF was on offer.
Yeah, so
60%.
Yeah. So at some point we'll see that. But I,
Yeah,
I'm not familiar. The two types of Volkswagens from the 1980s and early 90s, more than anything else, would be the
Mark ones.
Mark One Volkswagen Jetta and the
Yeah.
Mark Two Volkswagen Polo. I just before Christmas drove a Mark Two facelift Polo G40, which was absolutely amazing. And it's very cramped. It's not a car very suitable for someone of my build at all. It really isn't. It's very, very difficult to find a comfortable position in one of those. It's very.
I'm sure I'd cope.
It's very cramped. The steering's got no power assistance. You couldn't get power assistance on any Mark II Polo or facelift Polo. Electric windows were very, very expensive option that weren't fitted by most people.
What age was that then?
So 1993, the one I tested.
That's crazy, isn't it? To think that on the 93, the electric windows were really expensive, as on the 16 valve, I had the electric windows on the H plate.
Yeah.
But as you know, electric windows aren't what they seem to be back then. And I ripped them out in favor of putting manual winders on both because it failed on a ferry where I couldn't even shut the window.
Yeah, that's not the best, sir. And
No.
as you know, my Rover 600 that I had last year had a similar problem. The windows didn't open. But, amazingly, on a Rover 200, like one I've got at the moment, the electric windows are actually pretty good. They don't tend to go wrong.
It's like the Civic. The Civic's windows are perfectly fine.
I know. It's just certain types of car, and it's not even specific to make. Sometimes it's fine, and others they're not. So the Golf ones are not good. Rover 600 aren't good. But on your Civic and on my Rover 200, it's a 29-year-old car. It's 1 year newer than your Golf. They're absolutely fine, both of them. Yeah. And even the power shot. And I've even got a power shot on my driver's window because it's a Honda system. And by that stage, Honda had one-shot driver's windows.
Yeah.
So that
the same on the Civic, isn't it? But it's like the Mercedes as well. The Mercedes is the same age as your Rover.
Yeah.
And all 4 electric windows work perfectly, as do the seatbelt givers, whatever you call it.
Well, I think they're called a butler, actually.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's it's like a little electronic butler in a Mercedes that offers you a seatbelt. And again, we will talk about 1980s and 90s Mercedes as well. We've got loads of things to do. Japanese cars. We can look at Protons as well. That'll be an interesting episode looking at Mitsubishi and Proton because you've actually
triple valve.
Because you actually had a 90s Mitsubishi, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, so you had one of those, so we can talk about that. But yeah, the Polo Mark II facelift. The only way you get electric windows in that is a very expensive dealer fit option. They weren't in the factory. There's a dealer fit option, and had a manual sunroof in that. So no 5-door versions of the Mark II Polo at all. Very, very bad in a crash. Absolutely terrible in a crash.
I think the Golf and the Mark I Golf, the Mark II Golf, the Mark I Golf, and every other vehicle I owned was pretty bad in the crash. Yeah. Bar the Mercedes, which is a tank, but probably wouldn't fare well in today's test cases, but goes through anything.
Yeah. You don't want if you really want to see what a Mark II Polo is like in a crash. There's actually a footage of on a banger meeting in the 90s where they pull a Mark II Polo around on like a wire, and I think they crash it into something, and it's not pretty.
No.
I think I used to go around in a Mark II Polo very regularly indeed, because there was one that was owned by my sister's godmother, and also later by my childminder. It was the same car, but they owned it at different times. And I remember when I drove the G40, how cramped the inside of a Mark II Polo is. There's really not much room in there. But if you're like a young teenager or whatever, you don't care. And getting in and out, you've got to be really careful because the belts aren't...
Like a Fiesta, wasn't it? Similar size.
The belts aren't hidden at all. So the front seat belt, you can trip over the front seat belt getting in and out.
Well, that's exactly what the Mark I Golf was like that I had, the Cabriolet.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the seat belts. I mean, the only way that they were attached in the center was bolted directly in with 2 little leather things that came out with a bit of plastic around them.
Yeah, that's
They weren't even attached to the seat.
that's all you get. That's what you get.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to think about it sort of now and think about the safety standards or lack of the safety standards. But when I got into the back of the G40, and this is a coupe version, not the bread van version, and there was just no room. And I think, well, if you were like a young teenager in the late 90s, early 2000s, you have one of these, you wouldn't really think it to bother. But for somebody kind of now who's used to driving a much more modern cars, the steering was surprisingly heavy. I mean, it's only a 1.3 engine. I know it's got a turbo, but it has a surprising amount of power for a light car. And of course, you have the funny Volkswagen instrument panel where the indicators aren't even separate on the either side. You have one little LED right in the middle that tells you your indicators are on, and all the lights are exactly the same.
It had eight little bits in the middle with little lights, didn't it? I remember.
Yeah. Mark II, even the facelift ones have
Mark 1 Golf as well.
Yeah, Mark 1 Golf. Mark 2 Golf's not that dissimilar either, is it?
No, but I think it has separate ones for each indicator. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, it's all a little panel in there, which by about
Yeah, but you do have a fuel computer in the center as well, which tells you things like ambient temperature and oil temperature.
You've got this tiny little LED panel that's like a Mark 1 Golf in the middle, but you've got the trip computer in there as well. It's just bizarre, isn't it? This sort of because Volkswagens at the time they weren't really like they are kind of now. They weren't sort of prestige cars particularly.
Well, the 16 valve, if you remember the advert for it, it was quite a prestigious advert. Do you remember the advert?
I know the advert with the lady who kind of holds onto her key and says Volkswagens was sold on build quality and reliability. They weren't necessarily sold on being premium. They were sold on being very, very very sturdy, which isn't quite the same as a premium car, is it? That's not the same.
But
there we go.
They had things like air conditioning, if you remember. Certain editions, for example, the G60. Because you had the G60. Exactly.
Oh yeah, I don't remember that. That's a rare car.
Where premium came. Exactly. That's why the G40 and the G60 are considered premium in comparison to the others. The others were just, like you said, extremely well-built German cars.
Very, very austere inside. Really austere. Like you sort of, and it was a case for ages. They were a bit more expensive than an Escort, but really kind of just aimed at sort of the same people. It's just you get a more solid car, but really not much equipment. So if you were lucky in a Mark II Polo, if you got internally adjustable door mirrors, normally what you'd have to do is reach out the window and kind of move it by hand, which is what my childminder used to do, and that's just what it was like. The aerial in a Mark II Polo, if that broke, you just stuck a coat hanger in it. Same as on a Mark 1 Golf. The engineering in a Mark II Polo and a Mark 1 Golf's really quite similar. I think the suspension.
Now you've said it, think of all the vehicles you saw when you were younger with a wire coat hanger as the area.
Loads.
Mark II Escorts.
Mark II Escort, Cortinas, anything like that.
Yeah.
And the Jetta.
Chevettes.
Yes, exactly, Chevettes. We obviously will do Vauxhalls as well at some point.
Yeah.
If you look at a Mark 1 Jetta, though, which is what we had a 1983 Mark 1 Jetta. I think it was a 1.5. I think the engines in a Jetta 1.3, 1.5, and a 1.8 or something. It was an Audi engine. It's so difficult to find information on Mark 1 Jettas because they weren't very common at the time, and they certainly are not common now. I've seen one.
But they're very desirable now, especially in water-cooled Volkswagen groups.
I know. I mean, I would love to drive a Mark 1 Jetta to see why my parents decided to buy one. I think it's because they had a very positive experience with a Mark 1 Polo that they'd had in comparison to all the other British cars that they'd owned in the 70s, like Vauxhall Vivas, Cortina, Triumph Toledo, loads of stuff like that. And they decided to buy a Polo because they'd heard that they're very reliable from which magazine. And my father had towards the end of his life in 1990 a Mark II Polo that was a very sort of minor fate of an 86, and I think it was a sort of an 86, 87 car. I think it was a D. So yeah, again, it was very, very, very basic, but people used to love them. It was the time when but the idea of having a Fiesta gear with things like electric windows in it and stuff like that was just completely alien. You didn't get them in a box.
Well, that's it. I mean, you remember how the Mark II Golf advert was put across? The one where he pulled in his suit, all dressed up with his nice lady. Yeah.
That's it.
And then he can hear this squeak, and he has no clue where the squeak's coming from. And they're rocking the car, and the mechanic's doing everything. And then he's like, well, there's something going on. What is it? And then all of a sudden he realizes it's the lady's earring. And he gets his oil can out, oils the lady's earring while she's still asleep, as Annabelle's just added. And that was it. And then when the car pulls away, if you remember the old gent, his sign on the garage did the creak, and he cracked up laughing.
Yeah, I mean, they were a lot more reliable than, I don't know, stuff like Allegros, Maestros, that kind of stuff. And we will be getting on to,
They were making the mark.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, German cars, they had to save Volkswagen with the Mark I, didn't they? The people's car. I mean, you had the Beetle and all types of things, but the Golf was the one that had actually saved Volkswagen at one point.
You're right. They tried massively. There was the XNSU K70 that could have potentially done it. There was all the funny things in the 60s.
Well, Carmen gears and all that kind of
stuff.
Not
the Carmen gear, but the sort of square backs and Type 411s and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. The variants.
All that kind of stuff, which was supposed to replace the Beetle, but kind of just didn't. It just kind of kept on going like that because people kept.
They're also desirable nowadays, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They're very, very expensive as well. They're very rare and expensive. I haven't seen one for I don't know how long.
I was going to say you see more Carmen gears than you do squarebacks and things
like that. Yeah, you see
a
lot more Beetles and Carmen gears than you do squarebacks Type 411s or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
The marketing names on them weren't great at the time.
No.
Because we can't remember what they were.
They'd followed the same kind of format as the campers, hadn't they?
Yeah.
Type this, type
that, whatever. And it wasn't the name snappy. So calling cars a Passat, Golf, Polo, stuff Scirocco, that was a very, very good thing to do. And then Mark II Scirocco, again, a very desirable car now to get one of those, particularly a sort of like a Scala, GLX, something like that.
Well, that's it. You had the Storm and you had the Scala as well.
Yeah, it's funny that word Volkswagen have held on to that, and now it's type of the Skoda.
Yeah.
But it was a trim level on the Scirocco. Then they had the G60, didn't they? The G60 Scirocco as well, didn't they? The G60? Was that the Corrado?
No, they definitely did a G60 Corrado, but the Siroccos were 2-litre GTIs, weren't they, I think?
Yeah, I can't remember. It's called the GLX or whatever. It's very confusing because with the Mark II Jettas, I think they were called the GLI, not the GTI, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I can't quite remember. It's like if you remember when they had the Belmont, they never did a Belmont GTE. They did a Belmont SRI, but not a GTE.
They were more concerned about things like a CDX. I mean, a Belmont CDX, I think, is quite a nice car.
Well, the SRIs, my mate had one. It had a body kit, and I had it at the same time. He had it at the same time I had the Orion. And it was a formidable car. He had it lowered as well, and they were both as fast as each other.
The problem with the Belmont, really, and the Jetta is exactly the same as this. They were not as desirable as the car they were based on.
No, exactly.
They didn't sell as many of them. The values were lower, and so they
similar to the Orion and the Escort.
Exactly. I mean, how many Orions do you see now in comparison with Mark III and IV Escorts?
Well, you don't see either of many now, really.
You see more kind of, say, a Mark IV Escort. Occasionally, you'll see one of those. There's one that lives near here, but you don't see Orions at all. I remember in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, you saw Orions everywhere.
You did, yeah.
There were loads. But it's just funny, you know, to go out to the Jettas. I can't remember outside of the show. Again, Retro Rides Weekend, I saw a couple of Jettas. I can't remember the last time I saw a Jetta in the wild. I can't remember the last time I saw one.
No.
And for me, they're a nice car. I mean, I think aesthetically, the Mark II Jetta is a nicer looking car than the Mark One. But obviously, the Mark One.
That's an interesting one because the Mark One has more raw styling to it, whereas the Mark II, it's an interesting one because the Mark One Jettas are the ones that are far more heavily modified and slammed than the Mark IIs now.
Trying to find a standard Mark One Jetta.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it's like hen's teeth.
Even the one I saw, which was as similar as I'll ever get to the one that my parents had. I think it was an '83 in blue. That had different wheels on it. Would have been lowered.
Yeah.
So the fact, it's like trying to find standard golfs, or trying to find any Belmont. I can't remember the last time I saw a Belmont of any description at all.
Exactly.
But they're even rarer because they had really poor security and they used to get nicked in the '90s. But Jetta, just lack of interest.
Nicked in the '90s, guaranteed theft item.
Well, the
GTI.
Well, the GTIs were quite easy to steal, but the Astra.
Everything was easy to steal, even the Orions, half a tennis ball. The
Mark II Astra was the worst of all.
You know how you stole an Orion and an XR3i? You needed half a tennis ball. With the central locking, if you had half a tennis ball and pushed the air through at the right time, as the key would, exactly. Half a tennis ball to nick.
I mean, you just have to. There's no immobilizer. You just have to kind of have to just hot wire it underneath, and you're on. And then if you eat,
I was going to say we're obscuring off on tangents, aren't we? And we're up to 31 minutes 45 seconds.
I'm so sorry. Well, we have to leave it here. I mean, I don't think we've adequately covered
we haven't.
Volkswagens of the 80s and 90s, so we'll have to revisit it at some point. But thank you very much indeed for listening to the first episode of a slightly shambolic sound recording. It's indeed very shambolic, and I've heard some interference and things, and it cut out at points, and that's just the way that it goes. It is a bit shambolic, and it's actually held up better than everyone else we've done. We tried this several times.
Part of the character as well.
It is indeed, and we'll do another one of these really soon. This will be going up on my channel. The next one will be going up on a Planet Auto channel, and we really hope you enjoy this. I mean, there's lots of you out there who remember these cars like we do, and they were part of the family growing up, or they were ones you had as a very young person,
or ones that you coveted.
Yeah, I mean, a Mark II GTI. I'm sure that was something very desirable when you were younger, then, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. They were always seen flying past flat out. Same with the Capris, though. I always saw a lot of Capris. Anyway, we better cut this short, otherwise it will
That's
not.
for another episode. We could,
exactly.
It's going to have loads of these, obviously. So don't forget to subscribe to Lloyd Consulting. Don't forget to subscribe to Planet Auto, and you can follow us both on Instagram as well, and we've also got Facebook pages. Don't forget to, if you're watching on YouTube, then don't forget to like this video and to leave a comment below on Anchor FM. I don't know what you do exactly, but something like that. And we shall be with you again in another episode, which will be on the Planet Auto YouTube channel as well.
It will indeed. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you too, sir.
Bye-bye.